The palace was a fortress of gleaming stone, a towering monument of alien architecture that stretched high above the city. It was here that the alien queen ruled, a figure of immense power and influence. She had united the disparate factions of her people, bringing peace after centuries of war. But peace was fragile, and no one knew this better than Michael, a human soldier who served as one of the queen's personal guards. Michael stood in the grand hallway, his eyes scanning the long stretch of stone pillars and intricate carvings that adorned the walls. The soft hum of the palace's artificial lighting buzzed overhead, but beneath it, something felt off. The air was thick with tension, a weight that even the grandiose surroundings couldn't mask. The Queen had called for a public appearance, and it was Michael's job to ensure her safety. He had been assigned to the royal guard since his arrival on the alien world, and though the palace was a place of great beauty, Michael's sense of duty kept him focused on the task at hand. His uniform, pristine and perfectly pressed, gleamed in the light as he walked through the halls. He was trained for this, to be watchful, to be unyielding, and to never let his guard down. But today was different. The air felt charged, as if something was about to break. It had been a long while since Michael had seen the Queen in such a vulnerable state. She had always been composed, always in control, but recently there had been whispers. Whispers of a coup, of factions within her own court plotting against her. Michael had heard them, but he hadn't believed them. The Queen had a sharp mind and her reign was strong. Nothing could threaten that, or so he thought. The guard positioned himself outside the Queen's private chamber, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon. The hallway was empty now, save for a few scattered servants, all of them walking quickly, their eyes on the floor. No one wanted to attract attention. No one wanted to be caught in whatever was coming. Then, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the corridor. Michael turned sharply, his eyes scanning the area. A palace aide, a young alien woman, appeared around the corner, her face pale and panic-stricken. She was carrying a small, ornate box, its edges glowing with an eerie blue light. "What's wrong?" Michael asked, his voice low and commanding. The aide stopped in her tracks, eyes wide with fear. She handed the box to Michael without a word, her hands trembling. "The Queen, something's wrong, she's fallen." Michael's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, fallen?" The aide nodded quickly, her breath coming in short gasps. "She collapsed during the ceremony. No one knows why. They've taken her to her chambers, but the palace is in chaos. They're calling it an attack. You need to get inside now." Without hesitation, Michael took the box and rushed toward the Queen's chambers. His mind raced as he moved, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The Queen was the symbol of peace, the beacon of hope for the galaxy's delicate truce. If something had happened to her, if she was hurt, the consequences would be catastrophic. He arrived at the door to the Queen's private chambers and found it guarded by several alien soldiers. Their expressions were grim, their eyes focused on the entrance. "Let me through," Michael ordered, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had earned his place in the Queen's inner circle. The soldiers hesitated for a moment before stepping aside, allowing him to enter. Inside, the Queen lay motionless on a plush bed, her face pale, her breathing shallow. The room was filled with attendants, all of them watching in silence, waiting for something to change. A sense of unease lingered in the air. The Queen had always been strong, but now she seemed so fragile, so human in her vulnerability. "Step aside," Michael said, his voice firm. He moved to her side and gently placed the glowing box on the table beside the bed. The aides and doctors looked at him, unsure of what to do. Michael had been trained in combat, not medicine, but he had seen enough to know when someone was beyond help. "Is there anything you can do?" he asked, his eyes searching the faces of the attendants. One of the doctors, a pale alien with tentacles around his face, shook his head. "She was poisoned. We can't determine the cause. It's as if the poison was designed to shut down her body slowly, deliberately." Michael felt a cold chill crawl up his spine. Poison. It was the perfect weapon against a queen, a slow and silent death. But who could have done this? And why? As he looked down at the queen, he noticed something strange. Beneath her bed, partially hidden by the covers, was a small, metallic object. It glowed faintly, almost imperceptibly. Michael's heart skipped a beat. He recognized it. It was an artifact, one he had seen only once before in the archives. It was said to be a relic from an ancient alien civilization, rumored to hold immense power. But why was it here? Why had the queen kept it hidden? Without thinking, Michael bent down and grabbed the artifact, feeling a strange pulse of energy surge through his fingertips. He held it up, examining it closely. The surface was smooth, almost like polished glass, but it seemed to shimmer with a light of its own. "What's this?" one of the attendants asked, his voice trembling. "I don't know," Michael said, his mind racing. He looked at the queen again. There was something about the artifact that didn't sit right. It wasn't just a relic. It was connected to something much larger, something dangerous. The queen stirred slightly, her eyelids fluttering. Michael's breath caught in his throat as she opened her eyes. For a brief moment their gazes locked. Her eyes were filled with something, fear or perhaps recognition. Then she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Find the truth," she said before her eyes fluttered shut once more. Michael's mind was reeling. Find the truth. What did she mean? What had the queen been hiding? He knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just an attack. It was the beginning of something much darker, something that threatened not just the queen but the future of the galaxy itself. And it was up to him to uncover the truth. He turned, clutching the artifact tightly, as the weight of his responsibility settled on him like a heavy cloak. The game had changed. And Michael was caught in the center of it with no clear path ahead. Michael's steps echoed through the dark corridors of the palace, his mind still reeling from the queen's words. Find the truth. What did it mean? What truth was hidden beneath the surface of her condition? The artifact he held felt like a puzzle, its faint glow pulsating in his hand. Every step he took seemed to lead him deeper into a mystery that had no clear answers. He had just left the queen's chambers, her frail form still surrounded by the palace's finest healers, when he was approached by Zara, one of the palace aides who had always treated him with a kind but distant respect. Her wide eyes were filled with concern as she hurried to catch up with him. "Michael," she called, her voice hushed but urgent. "I need to speak with you." He slowed his pace, nodding for her to continue. They were in a secluded hallway now, far from the public spaces of the palace. The corridors were lined with old alien artwork, a silent testament to the long history of the alien species. Zara glanced over her shoulder to ensure they were alone before speaking. "I know you're looking into what happened to the queen," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have information that might help, but we have to be careful. There are eyes everywhere." Michael felt a prickling at the back of his neck. He had known for some time that the palace was full of secrets. This was not the first time Zara had hinted at knowing more than she was letting on. But now, with the queen in a coma and the palace on the brink of chaos, everything seemed far more dangerous. "What do you know?" he asked, his voice steady despite the weight of the situation. Zara hesitated, clearly struggling with the decision to trust him. Finally, she spoke, her words rushed. "There are factions within the palace, factions that want to take control no matter the cost. The queen's illness. It's no accident. The artifact you found, it's part of something bigger, something ancient, and the people in power want it for themselves." Michael's brow furrowed as he absorbed her words. "What are you talking about? The artifact is just a relic, a piece of the past. How could it have anything to do with the queen's fall?" Zara looked around again before stepping closer, lowering her voice even further. "The artifact isn't just a relic, it's a key to a weapon that could change the course of the galaxy. The queen kept it hidden for a reason, but someone found out, someone who wanted the power for themselves." Michael's grip tightened on the artifact. Who? Who would do something like this? Zara's eyes flickered with fear, and for a moment she looked as though she might say something more, but she stopped herself. I can't say more here, but I can help you. I know where the answers lie. Follow me. Without another word, Zara turned and began walking briskly down the hallway, her pace quickening. Michael hesitated for a moment, unsure of what was happening, but his instincts told him to follow. They passed through a series of narrow hallways and stairways, moving deeper into the heart of the palace. Finally, they reached a small, hidden door at the end of a shadowy corridor, one that Michael had never noticed before. Zara unlocked the door with a key she produced from her pocket and motioned for Michael to enter. He stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the dim light of the room. It was a small, circular chamber, its walls lined with ancient scrolls and artifacts. In the center of the room stood a table, covered in holographic projections of alien star maps and symbols Michael couldn't understand. "This is where it all began," Zara said, her voice tinged with awe. "The Queen didn't just inherit this palace. She inherited a legacy of power that stretches back millennia. These artifacts, these symbols, they're part of an ancient order, one that was meant to protect the galaxy from those who would use its power for destruction." Michael glanced around the room, his mind racing. The order, what does it have to do with the Queen? The Queen, Zara continued, was never just a leader. She was chosen to guard something, this artifact. It's one of many, each holding a piece of the key to unlocking a weapon of unimaginable power. The Queen's fall wasn't an accident. It was a well-coordinated effort by those who seek to use the weapon for themselves. They wanted her out of the way, and now that she's incapacitated, they think they can claim the artifact for themselves. Zara's words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Michael felt a wave of realization wash over him. The Queen had always been a symbol of unity and strength, but now it seemed she had been protecting something far more dangerous than anyone had realized. And now that the factions had learned of its existence, there was no telling what they might do to get their hands on it. "Who are these factions?" Michael asked, his voice tight with urgency. "And why now? Why not before?" "There are those within the palace, people who were once loyal to the Queen but who have grown disillusioned with her reign. They've allied themselves with a radical group of outsiders, rebels who have their own agenda. They believe that the weapon can be used to reshape the galaxy, but they don't know how to use it. Only the Queen had that knowledge, and now they'll stop at nothing to get it." Michael's mind raced. If the Queen's fall was part of a larger plan, then the danger was far greater than he had imagined. These factions would stop at nothing to seize control of the weapon, and with the Queen incapacitated, there was no one to stop them. "We need to stop them," he said, his voice firm. Zara nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "I agree, but we can't do it alone. We need to find others who are still loyal to the Queen, who understand the importance of protecting the legacy she left behind." Michael's mind churned as he thought about his next move. The palace was in turmoil, and he was no longer sure who could be trusted. The factions were everywhere, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to strike. He had to act quickly before the situation spiraled out of control. "We'll need to be careful," Michael said, glancing around the room once more. "If these factions are as dangerous as you say, we can't risk alerting them. We have to move quietly." Zara smiled faintly. "I knew you'd understand. We have to get the truth, and we have to do it before they do." With that, Zara began to work on the holographic map, bringing up coordinates and locations that seemed to be linked to the artifacts. Michael leaned over her shoulder, trying to make sense of the information. As he studied the map, he couldn't help but wonder if the Queen had known all along that this day would come. If the artifact was truly the key to a weapon of unimaginable power, then the fate of the galaxy rested in the hands of whoever controlled it. And right now, That person might just be Michael himself. The days following the discovery of the hidden room were tense. Michael couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Even inside the secretive chamber where Zara had taken him, every sound, every movement felt amplified, as if the walls themselves were listening. The palace, once a place of security, now felt like a labyrinth of secrets, each corner hiding something dangerous. Michael sat at a small table, studying the holographic map Zara had uncovered. The symbols and coordinates seemed meaningless to him, yet he knew they were crucial. Each point on the map marked a location of interest, possibly connected to the artifacts or hidden knowledge that could help explain the Queen's sudden downfall. But with every piece of information, the puzzle grew more complex. Zara, her face illuminated by the soft blue glow of the map, looked up at him. "We need to move quickly. There are only a few of us who still believe the Queen's intentions were pure. If we don't act now, the factions will have full control." Michael nodded, his mind racing. The factions within the palace, the ones who had betrayed the Queen and set her up for her fall, were growing in power. They had already started taking positions in key areas, from military outposts to government halls. If they discovered what Michael and Zara were after, it would be too late. He couldn't allow that to happen, not when the future of the galaxy was at stake. He stared at the coordinates again. One of them stood out. It was located deep in the palace's archives, a place Michael had only heard of in hushed whispers. Legend spoke of it as a repository of ancient knowledge, a hidden vault containing records of the alien species, earliest history and their greatest secrets. Could this be the key to understanding the artifact? Was the Queen's legacy tied to this place? "We need to go there," Michael said, his voice steady. "If there's anything that can explain this mess, it's in the archives." Zara's eyes narrowed. "The archives are heavily guarded. No one is allowed in without authorization, but I can get us in. There's a way." Michael didn't question her. He had learned by now that Zara knew more about the palace's hidden corners than most. She had lived in the shadows for so long, keeping her loyalty to the Queen while remaining unnoticed by the factions. Now, her knowledge of the palace's secrets was their best chance. As the days passed, Michael and Zara moved cautiously, gathering what little information they could without attracting attention. They learned of the factions' movements, of the powerful allies they were gaining among the alien species. But what unsettled Michael the most was the realization that the Queen's illness, her sudden fall, wasn't the only secret being hidden. The factions were hiding something far darker. They were willing to destroy everything the Queen had built, all for the sake of a weapon of unimaginable power. They made their way to the palace archives late one evening, under the cover of darkness. The moonlight filtered through narrow windows, casting long shadows across the ancient stone walls. Michael could hear his heartbeat in his ears, the sound of his boots echoing softly as they walked through the silent halls. Zara led the way, moving with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where she was going. They stopped in front of a set of heavy doors, guarded by two soldiers. Zara stepped forward, her expression calm but determined. She spoke in low tones, using a set of codes Michael didn't understand, her voice laced with authority. The soldiers hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside, allowing them to pass. Once inside, Michael's breath caught. The archives were vast, stretching far beyond what he had imagined. The walls were lined with rows upon rows of books and ancient scrolls, some of them glowing faintly with the same energy as the artifact Michael had found. There were holographic screens scattered across the room, displaying maps and data that Michael couldn't even begin to comprehend. Zara moved quickly, her eyes scanning the shelves for a specific section. She didn't hesitate. With a swift motion, she pulled out an old tome, its cover covered in dust. She handed it to Michael, her face grim. "This book contains the history of the artifact," she said, her voice low. "Everything you need to know is in here. It's what the Queen was trying to protect. Michael took the book from her and opened it carefully. The pages were yellowed with age, the text written in an ancient language that he couldn't read. But as he flipped through the pages, he found something that caught his attention: drawings of the artifact, each one marked with symbols he recognized from the map. There were also diagrams of the palace, marked with more coordinates and hidden locations. One of the diagrams showed a secret chamber beneath the archives, a place marked only as the heart of the galaxy. The heart of the galaxy, Michael murmured. What does that mean? Zara's face grew even more serious. The heart is where the weapon is kept. It's not just an artifact. It's a key to the weapon, and the Queen was its last guardian. The weapon can either unite the galaxy or destroy it. The factions want it, Michael. They'll do anything to get it. Michael's heart raced. If the Queen had been guarding something as dangerous as this weapon, then the stakes were higher than he could have imagined. The factions were already making their move, and once they discovered the truth, it would be too late. But he had a choice now. He could either let the factions take control or he could try to stop them. But to do that, he would need the Queen's knowledge, the one thing they didn't have. We have to get to the heart, Michael said, determination setting in. If we don't, the galaxy will fall into chaos. Zara nodded, but her expression remained tense. It won't be easy. The factions know about the heart. We can't afford to be caught, but if we can get to the heart before they do, we might have a chance. Michael closed the book and tucked it under his arm. We'll do whatever it takes. The two of them stood in the dim light of the archives, the weight of their decision hanging over them. They were no longer just protecting the Queen. They were fighting for the future of the galaxy itself. The factions were closing in, and time was running out. The journey to the heart of the galaxy had been long, but Michael felt the weight of time pressing harder with each step. The palace was no longer a sanctuary. It had become a maze of shadows and enemies, each corner potentially hiding those who would stop at nothing to control the artifact and the power it held. The silence of the archive seemed like a distant memory now, replaced by the constant tension that filled every hallway, every room. Michael and Zara had made their way deeper into the palace than anyone ever dared, traveling beneath the surface through hidden passages and forgotten corridors. The further they went, the more isolated they became. The corridors were damp and narrow, the air thick with dust and the smell of age. But they didn't stop. They couldn't afford to. Every moment spent in the open brought them closer to being discovered. "Do you think we'll make it?" Zara asked, her voice quiet yet tinged with uncertainty. She glanced over at Michael as they walked, her expression one of deep concentration. Michael didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure if he believed they would make it either. But he knew that if they didn't try, they would lose everything: the Queen's vision, the galaxy's fragile peace, and the hope that humanity and the alien races could coexist. He had to believe there was a way forward, even if it was unclear. "We don't have a choice," he said, his voice steady though doubt gnawed at him. "We're this close. We can't stop now." Zara nodded, and they continued on in silence, the only sound the soft echo of their footsteps in the dark. They had been walking for what seemed like hours when they finally reached a massive set of reinforced doors. The markings on them were familiar, signs and symbols that Michael had seen on the map, and in the book they had taken from the archives. This was it, the heart of the galaxy. Without speaking, Zara stepped forward and inserted a small, metallic key into a hidden lock beside the door. A low hum vibrated through the air, and the doors slowly creaked open, revealing a vast, empty chamber beyond. Michael could feel the air shift, the temperature dropping as they stepped inside. The chamber was unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls were lined with strange, glowing crystals, their light casting an eerie, otherworldly glow. In the center of the room stood a massive pedestal, its surface covered in intricate symbols that Michael couldn't decipher. And there, on the pedestal, lay the artifact, but it wasn't just the artifact. It was connected to a series of strange devices, their purpose unclear, but Michael could sense the power radiating from them. "This is it," Zara whispered. "The heart, it's not just a weapon, it's a source of unimaginable power. Whoever controls it controls everything." Michael stepped closer, his hand instinctively reaching out toward the artifact. The energy in the room seemed to pulse, and he could feel the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The closer he got, the more he realized just how dangerous this place was. The power that lay within this chamber could change the fate of the entire galaxy. Before he could touch the artifact, a sudden noise broke the silence, footsteps, rapid and coming closer. Michael's heart raced. The factions had found them. They had to move, and fast. Zara was the first to react, pulling Michael back toward the shadows. "We need to go. Now." They ran, their footsteps muffled by the thick stone floors, as the sounds of approaching soldiers grew louder. Michael's breath came in sharp, ragged gasps as they sprinted down a side corridor, Zara leading the way with surprising speed. The passage was narrow, and the walls seemed to close in on them as they hurried forward. But there was no turning back now. "They're closing in," Zara said, her voice strained as she glanced over her shoulder. "We have to find another way out of here." Michael's mind raced as they moved. He knew the palace better than anyone, but in these dark corridors, he wasn't sure where they were. His instincts told him to head back to the surface, but he couldn't risk being cornered. The factions would stop at nothing to take the heart and the power it offered. Suddenly, they reached another set of doors, this one smaller but no less reinforced. Zara immediately began working on the lock, her hands moving quickly and efficiently. Michael kept watch, his senses alert for any sign of the enemy. The door clicked open and Zara pushed it wide, motioning for Michael to follow. They stepped into a large, circular room, and Michael felt a shiver run down his spine. This wasn't just any room, it was a control center. The walls were lined with ancient machinery, glowing panels displaying data in languages Michael couldn't read. But the most significant thing was the large window that overlooked the central chamber where the artifact lay. From this vantage point, Michael could see the approaching soldiers below, their weapons drawn, their faces filled with determination. They had already figured out what Michael and Zara had been up to. There was no more hiding. They had to make a stand. "We need to stop them from reaching the artifact," Michael said, his voice tight with urgency. "We can't let them take it." Zara nodded, her face hardening with resolve. "Then we fight." They quickly set to work, activating the control panels and locking down the entrances to the chamber below. Michael felt a surge of adrenaline as he realized they were doing more than just protecting the artifact. They were fighting for the future of the galaxy. If they failed here, everything the Queen had worked for would be lost. The first soldier appeared, moving cautiously through the chamber below, his weapon raised. Michael and Zara stayed hidden, watching through the observation window above. The soldier was alone, but Michael knew more would follow. He had to act quickly. As the soldier stepped closer to the pedestal, Michael's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. He didn't hesitate. He moved quickly, stepping into the corridor that connected the control room to the chamber below. Zara followed closely behind, her face determined. Together, they rounded a corner and came face to face with the soldier. The soldier reacted too late, raising his weapon, but Michael was faster. He disarmed the soldier with a swift movement, knocking him to the ground. The soldier scrambled to regain his footing, but Michael was already moving, his hands quick and decisive. Zara joined him, taking a defensive stance as more soldiers began to flood into the chamber. The fight was on, and Michael knew it was only a matter of time before the entire palace descended upon them. They fought with everything they had, Zara using her knowledge of the palace's corridors to outmaneuver their enemies, while Michael relied on his training to disarm and disable the soldiers. But it was clear they were outnumbered. More soldiers were coming, and Michael could feel the tide turning against them. "We can't hold them off forever," Zara said, her voice strained with exertion. Michael nodded, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of an escape, but there was no easy way out. They had to act fast. He turned to Zara, his mind racing. "The artifact, we have to destroy it. If they take it, everything is lost." Zara's eyes widened in realization. "No, we can't destroy it. We don't know what will happen." But Michael was already moving toward the pedestal. He didn't have time to explain. The soldiers were closing in, and he knew they couldn't let the artifact fall into the wrong hands. He took the device in his hands, his fingers trembling as he reached for the power core at its center. He wasn't sure what would happen when he activated it, but he didn't have a choice. The fate of the galaxy rested on his shoulders. With a sharp twist, he activated the core.